Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today, we are diving deep into a serious issue: rising crime rates in Africa. Now, before we start, let's get one thing straight. Africa is not a country, it's a continent with 54 incredibly diverse nations, each facing its own unique challenges. So, when we talk about crime in Africa, we're not painting the whole continent with the same brush. What we are going to do is try to understand why certain places are struggling with this problem. We're talking poverty, we're talking politics, we're talking guns, drugs, the whole shebang. It's a tough conversation, but it's one we need to have. We're going to break down the complexities, look at the facts, and hopefully start thinking about solutions. So buckle up because this is going to be a bumpy ride. Let's be real, folks. Poverty is a breeding ground for crime. When people are struggling to survive, to put food on the table, desperation can lead them down some dark paths. You see this all over the world, and Africa is no exception. Imagine being a young person in a bustling city, surrounded by opportunity, but you can't get a foot in the door. No jobs, no prospects, just empty pockets and a rumbling stomach. It's a recipe for trouble, and unfortunately, some turn to crime as their only way out. Next up, we've got political instability. Now, this one's a real mess. Imagine a country where the government is more interested in lining their own pockets than serving the people. Corruption runs rampant, law enforcement is weak, and criminals, well, they're basically running the show. This lack of leadership creates a breeding ground for lawlessness. People lose faith in the system and they start taking matters into their own hands. It's a vicious cycle, and it's incredibly difficult to break. Now let's talk education, or rather the lack of it. Look, education is the key to a brighter future, right? It's the way out of poverty, the path to a good job, the foundation of a stable society. But what happens when that foundation crumbles? In many parts of Africa, access to quality education is limited, especially for those living in poverty. Without the skills and knowledge to compete in the job market, young people become vulnerable to the lure of quick money and criminal activity. Hold on to your hats, folks, because things are about to get shady. We are talking organized crime, the puppet masters of the criminal underworld. These guys are ruthless, they're powerful, and they're making a killing literally from drugs, human trafficking, you name it. And the worst part, they often have their hooks in the government, bribing officials and infiltrating law enforcement. It's like a real-life mafia movie, and it's making it nearly impossible to fight crime effectively. Let's talk about the elephant in the room: inequality. Now, inequality is a global issue, but in Africa it's particularly stark. You've got a small elite living in luxury, while the vast majority struggle to make ends meet. And guess what? That breeds resentment, frustration, and anger. When people feel like the system is rigged against them, they're more likely to lash out. Crime becomes a way to level the playing field, to take what they feel they're owed. It's a dangerous game, but for some, it's the only one in town. Okay, time for a reality check. Africa has a serious problem with weapons. From civil wars to porous borders, the continent is awash with guns. And I'm not talking about the legal kind. These weapons often end up in the wrong hands. fueling violence and making crime even more deadly. It's a terrifying thought, but for many communities, it's a daily reality. The easy availability of firearms makes settling scores quick and brutal, and it makes it that much harder for law enforcement to maintain order. High on crime, drugs, alcohol, and the destructive cycle of addiction. Let's be honest, folks. Drugs and alcohol don't exactly bring out the best in people. They cloud judgment, fuel aggression, and often lead to poor decision making. In many parts of Africa, substance abuse, especially among young people, is a major contributor to crime. Whether it's stealing to support a habit or committing violent acts under the influence, the link between substance abuse and crime is undeniable. It's a vicious cycle and is tearing communities apart. Concrete jungles, the dark side of Africa's urban boom. Africa is urbanizing faster than any other continent on the planet. Now, that should be a good thing, right? More opportunities, more development, more progress. But there's a flip side to this urban boom. It's putting a strain on resources, infrastructure, and social services. In overcrowded slums where poverty and unemployment are rampant, crime thrives. It's a perfect storm of factors, and it's creating a breeding ground for lawlessness and violence. Lost generations when community crumbles and values fade. Here's a tough pill to swallow. Sometimes the breakdown of traditional values and community structures can contribute to rising crime rates. Now, I'm not saying we need to go back in time, but strong communities are the backbone of a stable society. When families are fractured, when young people lack positive role models, when there's a sense of hopelessness and despair, it creates a void. And guess what fills that void? Often it's crime. A brighter future. Turning the tide on crime in Africa. Look, it's easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of the problem. But here's the thing, there's hope. All across Africa, communities are fighting back against crime. They're implementing community policing initiatives, investing in education and job training, and tackling corruption head on. It's a long and difficult road, but progress is being made. Remember, Africa is a continent of resilience, of innovation, of incredible people working to build a better future. So let's not give up hope. Let's stay informed. Let's support organizations working on the ground, and let's be part of the solution.